So, fast forward to editing, Lori. I had created thumbnails for every single one of these books, which takes a good bit of time. And I inserted them as I always have and always do. And all I have to say today is that Mercury is in retrograde, and some of them stuck, and some of them became missing files. And I have no idea why, and I don't really have time to fix it. So I apologize. I hope you just can take the time, if you're interested in some of them, to look up the book cover or to look it up, of course, and research it more. But hopefully you're able to figure out what it is that I said and read, and everybody will be okay. I do apologize, but I'm already late getting this out. So I just really want to get it finished for you today. So I hope you enjoy it anyway.
Hi, readers. Welcome back. I'm Lori, and I missed you. I'm just now kind of getting my voice back and able to kind of function without some NyQuil or DayQuil. And I'm kind of just getting back into the swing of my awaking life rather than my sleeping away a bug life. But I thought I would come and try to film a video for you today that I wanted to do last week about the books that I read in 2022. My wrap up video, my thoughts about some of them. It was an interesting reading year for me. I read 53 books when it was all said and done. And the first book I read was The Lions of Fifth Avenue by Fiona Davis. And the very last book I read was a short story called The Bookstore Sisters by Alice Hoffman. So those were kind of the bookends to a number of really good books and some that were maybe not so good, but I'm glad that I read them. So I participated in the Read Christie Challenge for 2022, which is a readathon of Agatha Christie novels. And I had never participated before. And so last year I decided that would be something I wanted to do because I have been wanting to read or reread all of her novels at some point in my life. Having said that, though, I didn't make it through the whole year of Read Christie. And in fact, I finished A Caribbean Mystery in August. So I did make it through that one. I made it through 8 months of the year. The theme of last year's Read Christie Challenge was travel, and that may have impacted my delight about some of these books, but one of my favorite of all time has always been Death on the Nile. And so I reread that, which was fun. That's the 16th in the Hercule Poirot series of mysteries because she has several detectives. And I gave that one a 5 star. So that was my favorite. The others were not 5 star reads for me. That, most of them were just okay. I don't love Poirot as much as I love Miss Marple, and there were a lot fewer Miss Marple murder mysteries than there were Poirot mysteries. So that was part of the challenge. And so I ended up swapping a few out in the end so that I could get a little bit more of Marple than I got of him. But I'm glad I did it. And I read a couple that I had not read before, so that was fun. And in fact, let me look at what I had. I have read After the Funeral, which I have always enjoyed a lot. So that was my second read of After the Funeral. I did enjoy Why Didn't They Ask Evans, which actually used to be called something else when I first read it, and they've renamed some of them, which is interesting to me. But I did read that, and I did enjoy that. And then I watched an adaptation on BritBox that they had done recently, and I liked that even more than I liked the book, I think. I gave the book 3 stars, but so that's kind of my Read Christie wrap up. The Lions of Fifth Avenue, the first book I read, I really did enjoy. That was the first Fiona Davis read for me. And I actually have another one on my shelves that I'd like to get to sooner than later. I gave this one 4 stars. So I'm not going to talk about the ones that I rated the highest necessarily, but they're the ones that stuck out really to me as I'm looking at the list. This one is a dual timeline. It follows two characters, Laura Lyon is a character who lives in the early 1900s, and her and her husband, who's been hired to work at the New York Public Library, actually live in an apartment in the library, which a lot of people don't realize exists, and that people did actually live there for a long time. And she is kind of at a crossroads in her life, and her story is evolving as she's kind of discovering that she wants more than just motherhood, and she wants more than just being the wife of this this successful man. And so her story evolves at the same time as Sadie, I think it's Sadie, yes, Sadie Donovan in the present time, in 1993, so not really our present but her present time. There are some documents stolen from the library, and she's the curator of the important collection area, and she's trying to figure out what happened. And of course, some eyes are on her, and some things are evolving, and she discovers information about Laura and her family, and so their stories do end up intertwining. I really enjoyed this one. I love a dual timeline historical fiction novel, certainly, but it was very well paced. I thought it was kind of a surprise plot line for me in the Laura Lyons story. I guess I just wanted more of Fiona Davis after reading this, and so I looked at some of her others, and I do plan to read more of them. One of my favorites was The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner, and this was also a book of the month selection for me. I did give this one 5 stars, and I read it in January as well. This is about a female apothecary who creates poisons, actually mixtures of herbs and things, to aid women in getting rid of their husbands who have done despicable things. And so she's basically an apothecary murderer for hire. Some things start to happen, and she's in danger of being discovered as a result of some circumstances and some people who are not able to keep her secret well. The story set in 1791 at the back of her apothecary shop. Then there's a dual timeline here too, because the historian named Caroline starts to research this, because she's visiting this area where the apothecary exists, and her husband was supposed to be on this trip with her, and he's not. And so she has this time, and she's exploring this area, and she stumbles upon this secret apothecary, and she starts to try to figure out who this woman was and what she did there. So I really did enjoy this. It was also very well paced, very detailed, historic fiction, dual timeline. It's my jam. And I would read another one of Sarah Penner's, and in fact, she has one coming out this year. So I'm very excited and anticipating that as well. Shiver by Ali Reynolds was one that was kind of a buzz at the beginning of last year. I read this in February. A lot of people were talking about it. It's a closed, isolated winter mystery, and in that time of year, that's a great thing for me. I always want to pick those up. This one is a weekend in the French Alps with a bunch of friends who were snowboarders, and they used to compete in snowboarding competitions. So they knew each other, they were friends, and they were competitive, and some things happened then, and they weren't really in touch for a long time, and then they were suddenly all sent a note that they were to gather in the French Alps for a reunion. And it was a bit of a sinister note in some ways, and so they all go back. And Mila is the first one to go, thinking that she was going to just catch up with her friends, but then they realize that there's something kind of sinister when they all arrive, something sinister going on. And there's some secrets that they've been keeping from each other that they don't want each other to know. Some of them were in relationship with each other at some points in their lives. And so they end up being stranded. They end up in danger. They end up where there's no one at this resort. There's no staff. There's no support. There's nothing. They're really just isolated completely from anyone else. All they have is food and I think alcohol, as I recall, and each other. And some things start to take a turn. I really did enjoy it. I didn't give it 5 stars. I gave it 4 stars, but I really recommend it. I would read it again, actually. It was that good. 2 Diana Gabaldon rereads for me this year, which is good because those are so big. I finished A Breath of Snow and Ashes, and I finished An Echo in the Bone. So I have 2 left, and I actually have started the next one in the series, which is Written in My Own Heart's Blood. I read book 6 and 7 of the 8, and I gave them both 5 stars. There is a density to these novels that I am noticing on the reread or the read for the first time in the case of An Echo in the Bone. She's a fantastic writer. So that I noticed that from the beginning. She's a fantastic storyteller and she's very detailed. And that can get in the way. And sometimes the stories, even in the end, when you wrap up, just seem a little bit unnecessary, the sort of tangents that the main story goes on. And they do add to the atmosphere and to the understanding of that time period. And so they're important, I think, for that reason. But they are very, very dense. So I would like to finish the next 2. I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about either one of them because if you haven't read the others and you plan to, then there would be some spoilers as a result of me telling you kind of where they are and what happened. But they've advanced in history to a time that is definitely intriguing to me. And I am noticing characters show up now that I'm more familiar with because of the setting at that time. They're both fun and hard and dark and deep, and they're a commitment for sure. A new author to me was Steve Kavanaugh, and he wrote a book called 13. He's written a lot of novels. This one I saw Sarah on Sarah's Nightstand talk about, and I think somebody else talked about it too. And it's about a serial killer has been pretty successful over time and is pretty like quick, brutal, and done and not getting caught. He ends up on the jury for the case of the murder that he had recently committed. I won't tell you a whole lot more about that either because I don't want to spoil anything for you. And then, of course, there's an attorney. I think his name is Eddie Flynn. And Eddie is asked to work on this case. And he's a little reluctant to do that, but he's kind of down on his luck and his marriage is falling apart and he needs some money. And so he agrees to work on the case. And it is full of surprises, I think, and very suspenseful and pretty gory and very good. And I gave it 4 stars, I think. Yeah, I gave it 4. Bathhouse was another one that a lot of people were talking about, and I was intrigued by it. You can tell I read a lot of mysteries and a lot of thrillers this year. I gave it 4 stars as well. It was very, and I gave it 4 stars. I was really leaning on 3 for the longest time, and then I gave it 4 stars in the end because of the way that it ended. There was a bit of a twist that I thought I knew exactly what was going to happen, and then I didn't. But this follows a man named Oliver who he's an addict. He's a gay man. He's not had a lot of success in his life, and he ends up in a relationship with a man named Nathan they're not married, but they've been together for a bit of time. And Nathan is a doctor and he's very wealthy, and so he's kind of rescued Oliver from from a different lifestyle. And while Nathan is away, Oliver goes to a bathhouse and something goes incredibly wrong. And he can't really report it to the police without his partner finding out, and he knows that that would be devastating, but he's been injured, so it's obvious that something's happened to him. His partner comes back, and then the rest kind of unfolds. And of course, he doesn't want to say, I was at a bathhouse cheating on you with another person, and that went wrong, right? But yeah, it's very suspenseful, I would say, but I did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. I might would read something else from this author. I did love the audiobook because it was narrated by a couple of different people, so it gave you kind of a feel for different voices and different characters, which I always like. Frederick Bachman showed up in my reads again this year, and I have enjoyed most of what I've read from Frederick Bachman very, very much. And this was no exception. This was a 5-star read for me. Having said that, this is a tearjerker. I can't imagine anyone not crying over this one, truly. I listened to it. It was available on Scribd, and it's called And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer. One of the things I said in my review was that I'm not sure that I really have words to describe how I felt about that book. It is about a young boy and his grandfather the grandfather's having some memory loss. And if you've ever loved anyone who's had a memory loss disease, you will really be impacted by this, as I was. My mom had Alzheimer's, as did her sisters. But it was so beautiful, and it was very short, and it was so accurate in its sort of detail about the experiences and of each of them and the trajectory of this disease that just takes so much from both the person that has Alzheimer's or memory loss disorder and the people that care for them. So I highly recommend it if you're in the space where you would like to give that a try. So another fun one that wasn't a 5-star, but it was a 4 for me, is called The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. She's a new author to me as well. I probably would read another novel by Beth O'Leary. The Flat Share has a bit of an implausible premise to me, but essentially these two people who are trying to save money decide to share a flat with each other because she works during the day and he works during the evenings at a hospital. And they don't know each other at all. And they share the same bed, which I found to be very implausible, but it's a 1-bedroom flat. Neither one of them have a whole lot of money. It's the story of their experience in this flat without giving away any spoilers. It's light, it's funny. I needed that after the Frederick Bachman. It's not gonna, blow you away, but I did end up giving it 4 stars. It was well written. And it got me out of a reading slump, so that's always important to me. I read Verity by Colleen Hoover. I have only ever read one other book by Colleen Hoover, and I can't even remember now what it was called, but it's been a while since I did read that. And I'm not one of those people that says, oh, I want to read everything she's ever written. But this one really stood out to me because it wasn't like some of her others. It had a different premise, and I thought it was interesting. And so I listened to this alongside my daughters who listened to it also. And we all then chatted about it. And we all enjoyed it a lot. It was fast paced. I couldn't stop listening to it. I really was engrossed in this story. They ended up, right after we finished, Colleen Hoover ended up writing an additional chapter that she added onto it. So now there are 2 versions. There's the first version that she published, and then the version with the enhanced chapter at the end. I didn't buy that because I didn't love it enough to own it. I gave it 4 stars if you're curious, because it was very well plotted and very well written. but I did want to read that last chapter. So I ended up going to a bookstore and reading it in the bookstore at the table so that I could finish it. And then my girls somehow got access to it. And they may have done the very same thing as I did. I would say this is definitely my favorite Colleen Hoover. But again, I only have one other one to compare this to. It was narrated by two different women characters in the novel, so that was interesting. So it follows a woman named Lowen Ashley, who's a writer, and she's been really struggling to make any money and to complete books on time, and she's really broke. And it starts out where she witnesses or is impacted slightly by a car accident, as I recall, and she meets this man who helps her recover quickly from this car accident because she's on her way to a pitch meeting. His name is Jeremy, and he ends up hiring her to finish a book that was started by his wife, who is a famous author, is very successful, and is unable to finish this book. It is filled with intense intense plotting, and it's a ride. You feel like you've been on a roller coaster when you finish this book, I think most people would say. It has a rating on Goodreads of 4.39. Over 1.5 million people have read or reviewed this book. So for that reason only, it's very memorable. Well, not that reason only. It's very memorable because it was so intense. It was so hard to put down, and she added this last chapter, which I'm not going to even tell you how I feel about, because I want you to have absolutely no spoilers other than what is in the description or on the book jacket. I read The It Girl by Ruth Ware this year. I'm a big fan of Ruth Ware, but I wasn't as big a fan of The It Girl as I have been of other novels. This follows April Cliveden, who also, this is kind of a collegial group of friends who all went to college together, and they all have these different experiences. And so there's some flashbacks on that. And then one of them is murdered and somebody else is convicted of that murder, and then he dies in prison. And so this April and her friends come back to this as a result of that, and it is a very interesting plot. And it wasn't one of my favorites by Ruth Ware, but I did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. I think I give it 4 stars. It probably was more like a 3.5, but I love Ruth Ware, so I gave her 4 stars. Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I have read a few of hers. Book Lovers was my favorite of hers, for sure. This one follows 2 writers who kind of stumble upon each other because one of them lives in this little town, or has lived in this little town, and the other is there with her sister kind of on a getaway. And they hate each other, and so it's kind of a hate to love kind of situation, which most of Emily Henry's are. And it was fun, and it's gotten a lot of buzz. I think I gave it 4 stars too. Upgrade by Blake Crouch. Upgrade is my top read of 2022. I have rated it solidly at the top. I love Blake Crouch. I really do. I've read everything he's ever written, I think. Well, that's not true. I've read everything that is kind of like in the mainstream. All I'm going to tell you is that this follows Logan Ramsey, who something is happening to his brain and to his thoughts, and he is noticing his body is shifting and changing, and so something's going on, and he's had an upgrade. That's all I'm going to say. And the rest of it is pretty intriguing, and I flew through that one too, and it was a book of the month selection for me, so I enjoyed that very much. The House Across the Lake, Riley Sager, a favorite author of mine, gave it 4 stars. It's weird. There's no question it's weird to me. It's a little bit implausible for some. I get it. I was a bit surprised by it too. It's good. I mean, I enjoyed it. It has a kind of, people either hate or love it. I'm still a big fan. It follows a woman whose husband has died and she's an alcoholic and she's not coping well with all of this. And so she's gone away to this house on a lake. And that's all I'm going to tell you. That's all I'm going to tell you because I don't want you to be spoiled for it. And it was good. It was good. The Darkness by Ragnar Jonasson. This is a new author to me. It's translated from, I believe, Swedish to English. It takes place in Reykjavik. It takes place in Reykjavik. So there we go. And it follows an investigation. It's a police procedural of a death for a Russian woman, and there's question about whether it's been suicide or a murder. And this woman, Hulda Hermansdottir. Uh, this is not my best language, right? Hulda is forced into early retirement, and she wants to continue to work out until she, can't work anymore, until they won't let her work anymore. So they give her this cold case files, to go through, and she picks this one, and she thinks maybe this isn't as cold or as closed as it should be, and so she begins to investigate it. This is the first novel in the Hidden Iceland series. And I do want to read more of those. I listened to it on Scribd, and I did really enjoy it. Daisy Darker, Alice Feeney. I wasn't sure how I was feeling about it. And it had a twist at the end, too, which made me feel a little bit more attuned to it. It was good. I like Alice Feeney. I also read Rock, Paper, Scissors this year. That one had a bit of an impact. I mean, I remember that one, but I remember Daisy Darker a lot more. So I think of the two of them, I would recommend Daisy Darker over the other one slightly. It had also just a very unique ending, and it stayed with me all this time. I didn't rate it. I think I just didn't know how to rate it at that time. I just wasn't sure what had just happened. But yeah, I think it was good. The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. I love that author. It was also memorable to me. I enjoyed it. It wasn't a 5-star for me either. I really struggled with rating things 5 stars this year. I'm usually very generous with my stars, but this year I wasn't quite, they weren't quite where I needed them to be, but it was good. I enjoyed it. I would recommend it to people. The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. However, I have either I love or don't love strongly Paul Tremblay novels. I did not love The Cabin in the Woods. I did not love The Pallbearers Club. This was one of the weirdest things I've read in a long time. I gave it 3 stars just because the writing is solid. It's probably rounded up to 3. It was more of a 2.5 for me. I'm not alone because the total ratings on this for Paul Tremblay are 3.19. It was a miss for me. It's billed as a psychological thriller about an unforgettable and unsettling friendship with blood-chilling twists. I don't think they were blood-chilling. Crackling wit. No, not for me. I think he tried to be witty, and a thrumming pulse in its veins. And then it asks, what if the coolest girl you've ever met decided to be your friend? And it follows this boy and this woman over a period of time. And let me know if you read this and how you felt about it, because I'm sure there are people that disagree with me, but it just wasn't even really scary to me. However, I loved Take My Hand by Dolan Perez Valdez, which is a historical fiction about a woman out of nursing school who starts to work at a clinic with young girls who are at risk for becoming pregnant. And the clinic has some things that they do to prevent pregnancy. And that's all I'm going to say. And it follows this nurse and her patients and her experience in this clinic, and it follows what happens to this clinic over time and what happens in the world. And oh my gosh, it was good. And there's a bit of a dual timeline and some flashbacks too, which were well done. Well done. Four stars. I read The Girls at 17 Swan Street. It was a NetGalley advanced copy for me that I got a long, long time ago by Yara Zabe, and I loved it. 5 beautiful, wonderful stars. I'm so sad I waited this long to read it. It's difficult. It's a dual timeline. It follows a woman who's struggling with anorexia, and it follows her kind of entry into anorexia, her relationship with her now husband, her inpatient treatment with others who are struggling with eating disorders. And oh my goodness, it was beautiful and heartbreaking and well written, and an important read, I think, for anyone who is trying to understand the nuances of this disease and the thought patterns and processes and disordered thinking and all of those things that happen as a result of this. And I loved it. I highly recommend it. I started a reread of the Kay Scarpetta series, and I finished Postmortem first, and it was the first one in the series, and that was the one I reread. I started that reread toward the end of the year, so I'm going to just get to those when I get to them, but I did want to go back to those. The 12 Dates of Christmas by Jenny Bayliss was the only, well, not the only, but one of the only Christmas reads for me. I saw some buzz about that one too. I got it on Libro as an audio. I thought it was fun and light, and it was just what I needed at that time. I gave it 3 stars in terms of the how I felt about it. My daughter listened to it at the same time I did. She also enjoyed it. If you're looking for, or you like an after Christmas read, it's a Hallmark movie in a book for sure. It's predictable, it's funny, it's light. I think it makes fun of itself. And it's about a woman who goes on this sort of planned 12 dates experience for a number of people, and she wants to meet somebody new. And of course, she has a best friend who thinks that's this terrible idea, and it goes from there. Okay, so that is my 2022 wrap up. This is long. I don't know if I will leave all of these in that I've talked about. We'll see, but thanks for listening. Thanks for your comments on my end of the year reading post. Oh, and let me know what you read this year. What stood out for you? What was your favorite? Kind of what your thoughts were about your reading year. I'd love to know that. So post that in the comments below. And as always, happy reading. Bye.